Frank Gaffney's with me, as he is pretty much every Wednesday. He is the leader of the Center for Security Policy, the executive chairman there, the vice chair in the committee on the Present Danger China. You go to presentdangerchina.org for that. And Frank, I know you've got a new headline or a new title that it did not make it in the show rundown today. What was it again?
Well, I'm the host of a new program on America's Voice News Network called Securing America with Frank Gaffney. I'm very proud to have that as a new entry in my CV. It airs at 5 each evening at americasvoice.news. Okay,
very cool. Okay, so Frank, let's roll through some of the news that's going on. Give me your thoughts on what's happening in Azerbaijan right now. It seems like this could be a very unstable situation that is not going to get a lot of attention because we don't have time to talk about Azerbaijan for some obvious reasons. But Armenia and Azerbaijan are basically in a war at the moment. What's going on?
What's going on, Alex, which is really important, is that Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the dictator of Turkey, is using his influence in that part of the world, as he is in a number of others of great concern to, I think, our interests, to destabilize the situation, to try to inflame what I call Sharia supremacist tendencies in the local population, in this case in Nagorno-Karabakh, an enclave in Armenia, and to incite, essentially, the kinds of violent outcomes that he thinks will benefit Turkey and his larger design to assert its domination in a manner kind of akin to that of the old Ottoman caliphs. And this is very ominous. Our friends in Israel have recently come up on the net warning about what Turkey is doing in Jerusalem, among other places, in the Gulf, in Nigeria, in Libya, in the Eastern Mediterranean, possibly precipitating a conflict with an actual NATO ally, as opposed to what Turkey has become, Greece. So in the range of nations from basically Spain all the way to Armenia and beyond, Kazakhstan and so on, we're seeing this kind of behavior in Northern Europe, even let alone Southern. The immigration crisis is being rekindled because Erdogan is pushing more unassimilable, mostly Muslim and mostly Sharia supremacist, I think, Muslim immigrants into Europe. And as I say, in North Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Central Asia, this guy is on the march, and it's very dangerous, I think, for the people most immediately involved, of course, but also for our vital interests as well.
And the pattern that we've tracked at Breitbart over the years is that he seems to make his moves when the international news media is distracted. And that is a perfect moment right now because in America we're so focused on domestic politics at the moment. So what does it look like if Donald Trump wins and is still going to be president? He's not going to do anything, I don't think, for the next 4 weeks. But let's say Trump wins. What type of a position do you think he would take? And if Trump loses, I imagine he's not going to spend much time on it in the last couple of months he has as president. So what would it look like what is the likely outcome if a Joe Biden administration comes and takes over for this region?
Great question, Alex, and I think the answer is twofold. One, I believe that President Trump has been somewhat misled about the true character of Erdogan. I think he admires strong leaders. We know that. But I think in this case, his admiration for Erdogan is really misplaced. That has given Erdogan something of a pass, as has the fact that it's very vexing, I have to say. There is no mechanism for removing a NATO member from the alliance, even if it ceases to be actually an ally. And as a result, I think he has been somewhat hamstrung in taking much in the way of definitive action to this point, and I'm not sure that will change materially under either of the scenarios you've just described. As to Biden is making a very concerted play for the vote of American Muslims. And that means he is really thrown in with the Muslim Brotherhood operations that are the self-established leaders of the Muslim community, to the point where he actually made this really amazing sort of act of supplication to them the other day, in which he cited, I believe it was a hadith from Bukhari, partially. And it talks about if, you see something wrong, you must fix it, and you must fix it with your heart, and you must fix it with your words, and you must fix it with your mind. And he left out the next what you must do, which is if none of those work, you must use the sword to fix it. Now, that is a selective rendering of Islam that is very common in the Muslim Brotherhood's operations. It is a Sharia supremacist deal. And by the way, it's under new management in this country as well as elsewhere around the world. And guess who is running it? Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey. So this is another problem that makes it a problem in America, what Turkey is up to, not just what its ambitions are elsewhere around the world.
Okay, so let's break down some of the sides here. You've got Iran is backing Azerbaijan in this. You've got the Armenian prime minister has asked the U.S. to stop selling fighter jets to Turkey. It seems logical to me. Canada has weighed in here. They're blocking military tech sales to Turkey amid the Armenian border clash. All of this seems to be pretty logical here, Frank, but is there anything here that's surprising, and do you think there is a chance the United States does anything in the next few weeks?
Well, no, let's go back to that, because that's really such a key point, Alex. Unfortunately, it's not just Erdogan in Turkey who realizes that there's a window of opportunity here. I think it's equally true of the Chinese. I think it's probably equally true of the Russians, possibly the Iranians and others. They are all too aware that there is a very serious distraction for the existing administration. There will be some kind of transition, possibly very messy, irrespective of who wins, that will further tie up the United States and probably leave plenty of running room for our adversaries to try to, change the nature of the game, the facts on the ground, as they say. Particularly concerning is the possibility that the Chinese may actually move out of the exercises that they have been increasingly engaging in against Taiwan and actually go for it. Taking advantage of this, as I say, this moment when we may not be as prepared or as focused or as ready to engage to dissuade them from doing that. So this is a moment where, as ever, I think it's important for us both in the course of this debate, tonight, specifically in the course of this national decision that we're in the midst of, that national security and foreign policy get their due. It's just a terrible mistake. And I think I've said on the show before, Alex, I feel very strongly, irrespective of who is going to be our next commander-in-chief, they're going to have to deal with this world. Specifically, they're going to have to deal, as I believe, job one, with China, the Chinese Communist Party as our adversary. And we need to know what these candidates are going to do about those kinds of problems before we give them our vote, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's a good points all the way around. Frank, let's talk about a couple other things. Let's continue with Turkey. And Israel is really starting to talk much more tough about Turkey, saying that they're destabilizing the region. I think we know that's true, but then what does the rest of the world react to that? I imagine that this is actually animating for some of the adversaries of Israel in the United States. But are you seeing a policy change or mostly a rhetoric change?
Well, I think there are going to have to be some policy changes as well as rhetoric. Alex, I believe that what Israel is now facing is this increasing evidence that inside Jerusalem, for example, and certainly in the Palestinian community, Turkey is trying to foment trouble, incite people to violence, claim that Israel is Judaizing Jerusalem, which is actually our city, Erdogan says. I mean, these are the sorts of provocative things that are akin to, the proverbial match thrown into a highly flammable, pile. This is not to be messed with. In addition, of course, we've seen these momentous developments between Israel and some of the Gulf states, most of whom are now very much at loggerheads with not just Iran across the Persian Gulf, but with Qatar, who's nominally one of their own. Only Qatar is working with the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is a thoroughly Sharia supremacist operation, and Qatar is the big funder of a lot of Erdogan's malevolence. So whether it's a sort of axis of evil, if you will, that is kind of developing among these states, including with Iran, they don't always get along, but Iran and Turkey seem to be willing to make common cause against these other states that are now increasingly finding common cause with Israel. And it's a volatile situation, and it could lead to miscalculation. It could lead to conflict, especially, Alex, and I hate to keep coming back to it, but as you know, I think this is of surpassing importance, what China is up to. The Chinese Communist Party has engineered a deal with Iran to open up, at the minimum, an intelligence facility as part of a tangible manifestation of a larger strategic partnership. They're buying its oil. They almost certainly are going to make a big Belt and Road play there, infrastructure building and so on. They're, by the way, completely depleting the fish stocks of the Persian Gulf with their massive factory ship operations. And in other ways, they're going to, I'm afraid, become increasingly a force for ill in that volatile region. So for all these reasons, I think what makes this question that you started with so vital is we've got to connect the dots on what actual adversaries of this country are up to, and we've got to be sure that we're making an informed choice about who we want to have contend with all of this in the days ahead.
Okay, Frank, let's talk about China. So China right now is attacking the United States for systemic racial discrimination at the UN, as is North Korea and Cuba and Iran. This is something that I think our media doesn't care about for whatever reason, but basically China tends to take the worst talking points against President Trump and the country, and that we originate here, and they amplify it to their own people and to their whoever pays attention to them globally, which is quite a number of people. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Alex, I think I would disagree with you about that. I think that racism has been a weapon in the arsenal of Marxists, Leninists, Maoists, communists of other stripes, socialists, emanating from, the Soviet Union's playbook back in the day. This is something that I believe has been obviously evident in certain communities in the United States for a long time, but I think the real use of it as a force for dividing and ultimately destroying this country is something that is very much part of what China has been doing for decades. It is what the Soviets did in their day. To some extent, I think the Russians continue to do it. And it works. I mean, that's the trouble, is that it does disorganize us at the very best, and certainly divides us. And now you've got these elements that I think are really best described as parts of the United Front Work Department of China. which is an instrument that the Chinese government has had in place for many years to sort of foster influence operations and subversion in foreign countries. And it turns out that the United Front works very closely with a group called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization and a splinter movement of it called Liberation Road, and something called the Chinese Progressive Association, and of course the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States, and the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries, which is a government agency of China, are all in the mix of trying to see what they can do to promote Black Lives Matter and, yes, Antifa and their insurrection, if not actual revolution inside our country, using racism as the means of, again, dividing and dismembering us. So this is a much bigger play than us telling them about racism and then them repeating it at the UN. It is absurd. And just a final point, Alex, there is arguably no more racist operation in the world today than the Chinese Communist Party because of its attachment to what's been called Han supremacism. And you talk to black people, the government of Nigeria recently came up on the net, others have as well in connection with the coronavirus in China. The treatment of blacks, the treatment of whites for that matter, the treatment of anybody other than Han Chinese, whether they're Tibetans, whether they're Uyghurs, whether they're South Mongolians, captive nations, I call them, they're all horribly treated by this racist regime. And for them to be using platforms like the UN to denounce us, especially with the company, the unsavory company that they have, the North Koreans and the Cubans and the Iranians. I mean, it's laughable, except that it's deadly serious that they're actually working hard to take us down. And they're using every instrument in their book, including this racism card.
Okay, Frank, last one I want to mention, the North Carolina State Secretary has been revealed that he said, I guess it was in 2018, that the Chinese-sponsored Confucius Institutes, their reach throughout the state was actually a good thing, and he praised it. And this is very troubling. Elaine Marshall, I guess so it was a lady, so praising the sorry about that. So the not he, she, praising the Confucius Institutes. Confucius Institutes are a huge threat. They're obviously Chinese infiltration in the United States. It seems like we're getting this, but I don't know if we're doing enough. Give us your thoughts.
Well, again, it goes back to what I was just saying, Alex. This influence operation that the Chinese are mounting against us is unbelievably comprehensive. And one of the most insidious elements of it is that they've used our universities and colleges as places where they can institute these so-called Confucius institutes to both influence language training, of course, is the pretext that's being used, but influence who does the teaching on the campuses, what sort of curriculums are used on the campuses, who can come as speakers, guest speakers on the campuses. They also use them to control and monitor the activities of Chinese students, of whom there are hundreds of thousands on campuses, or at least there have been until lately. So this is very much another arm of the Chinese Communist Party inside this country. And in fairness to this Secretary of State, I think back in 2018, an awful lot of people thought this was nothing but good. To the Trump administration's great credit, and I also want to do a shout out for a wonderful scholar at the National Association of Scholars by the name of Rochelle Peterson, who's done seminal work in exposing these Confucius Institutes. But the Trump administration has too, including in the person of Mike Pompeo. And now Thanks to Senator Cruz and others, we've seen legislation adopted that says, hey, you can't get government money, our government's money, if you're going to have Chinese government money on your campuses in these institutes. So they're beginning to be rolled up, but it's not fast enough, honestly. And in addition to getting them off campuses, I think we really have to think hard about having graduate students from China studying in the hard sciences, and perhaps others, because oftentimes, Alex, they are at the very least susceptible to pressure from the Chinese Communist Party on their families if they're not actually here at their specific direction for the purpose of stealing our stuff. Training, yes, but also, expropriating, often illegally, research or other intellectual property, proprietary information, and the like, all of which is part of this comprehensive, what's called civil-military fusion or hybrid warfare by the Chinese Communist Party. We've never seen anything like it, Alex. It's just staggering, the extent and the disciplined, patient, comprehensive way the Chinese are working to achieve their goal, which is ultimately the destruction of the United States and their domination of the world.
Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy, securefreedom.org, counterjihad.com, presentdangerchina.org for the committee and the Present Danger China, and then the new show, Securing America with Frank Gaffney. Give us where people can get it again, Frank.
americasvoice.news.
Okay, very cool. So you guys can go over there and check that out. And so it's going to be every day?
Every weekday, yes, sir.
Every
Praise
weekday.
God.
Very cool. Frank, okay, thanks so much for your contributions. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, my friend. Bless you.